In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your radiator on this Lexus IS250. This is located behind your front bumper, but we will access it from the engine bay. You do not have to remove the bumper cover for this. Let's get started. At the front of the engine, right behind the radiator, you'll see the radiator cap. Let's remove this. Make sure the engine's cold, of course. Turn it counterclockwise. Sometimes you might need to press down on it in order to release it. It'll click once and then it'll click again, and only then can you pull it off. Set this aside. Underneath the vehicle on the front where the radiator is, typically there's a shield here. Mine is missing, but you would either want to partially remove it or completely remove it with a 10mm socket and a trim tool for some push clips. Or if you reach around, you might be able to access this because that shield is supposed to have a hole for the coolant to drain through, so you may not even have to remove it. Regardless, turn this counterclockwise and unthread it. That will allow coolant to drain, and we'll just let this completely drain. This is done draining, so I'll thread this back in to close it off. Make sure that it's snug, but it's plastic, so once it bottoms out, tiny bit extra, put some pressure on it, and that's it. Wipe off anything that's still dripping, and then if you had a shield right here, put it back on. Now we have to remove this cover, and it's just held on with a bunch of push clips, so we'll go around, pop them all out with a trim tool, and then remove the cover. We have to remove this air intake duct, and it's clipped on with a push clip on one side and a bolt on the other side. Let's start with the push clip. This is the style that you have to press down to unlock it. Using a trim tool, remove it. On the other side, it should be a 10mm headed fastener. However, mine has been replaced, so I'm using a Torx to remove it. Now you can lift it and pull on it sideways to unhook it from the airbox. And there it is. Set that aside. Let's remove the upper radiator hose from both ends, so we'll pinch the clamps, move them aside, and pull the hose off. Set this aside. Pop off the coolant overflow cap with the hose, and we'll set this aside. There are now two 10mm bolts to remove, one on the left, one on the right, and we'll pop this wiring harness off as well. Using needle nose pliers, I'm going to pinch the two sides of the clip on this harness, pop it out, and then we'll get the two bolts. Now with the harness moved out of the way, you can lift the tank right up and out. Each radiator fan will have a connector that looks like this that we have to unplug. There's one on the left and one on the right. We'll press on the tab in the center, pull the connector out. What we also need to do is remove the retainer for the wiring off of the fan. Use a trim tool for that, just pop it out. Do the same to the other fan. What we also need to do is separate the lower radiator hose from this bracket or this clamp that holds it on. Just press on these two white tabs and pull this away. I find it easier to unhook the hose off the clamp than to pull the clamp off of the fan assembly. At the top, we'll have 3 sets of these clips, and what we have to do is squish them in and pull the fan assembly out, and that will release it from the top. Okay, there's the fan. Now just very gently and carefully lift up the fan assembly, trying not to damage anything that's in the way, of course. Watch out for wires and hoses. And there's the fan assembly. We can now loosen up the clamp on the lower radiator hose. Mine's been replaced. You should have the spring clamp style clamp just like on the upper radiator hose. I'm going to use an 8mm socket and loosen mine up. Once you've loosened it up enough, you should be able to slide it away, and with a drain pan underneath, because this is going to leak some fluid no matter how much you drain it. Some will still collect in the low radiator hose. Remove the hose. There we go. Near each headlight at the top on the upper radiator support, we have two 10mm bolts holding on the radiator support. Now, there are things connected to it, but I don't want to remove anything. I just want to unbolt it from here because all we need to do is kind of lift it up a little bit so we can release the top mounting bushing of the radiator. So remove both bolts on both sides. Lift the radiator support up, push the radiator back. Pushing the radiator back, you'll see the 10mm headed bolt that holds the AC condenser onto the radiator. We're gonna have to loosen these up and remove them so we can separate the condenser from the radiator. There's one, and another one on the other side. Now we just wanna push the radiator back towards the engine and wiggle it right up and out. There it is. One thing we do need off of this radiator though are the mounting bushings, top and bottom. The bottom ones always stay on the vehicle side, but the top ones will pretty much always come off with the radiator. So we'll take both off, left and right, and now we can dispose of our old radiator. Now if you had your new radiator, reinstall the two rubber mounts at the top, one on one side with the pointy part facing up, and one on the other side. And slide the radiator down, paying attention to your fins so you don't damage them, as well as any other components that are in the way, wires, hoses. You don't want to crush or pinch any of those. Make sure that it falls into place, just like that. You'll kind of feel it lock in as you drop it down. Line up the AC condenser with the radiator. Start in at least one of the mounting bolts so you can keep them secured together. Once you get one lined up, snug it up. Just snug about 1/8 of a turn after it bottoms out. You don't want to crack the plastic radiator. And we'll do the same to the other bolt. Now what we need to do is lift up on the upper radiator support, slide the radiator and the bushings underneath. As soon as they line up, drop it back down, and then we'll bolt it on. Start them both in, and then once they're both started, I will snug them. Make sure everything is seated properly on each side. Of course, do the same to the other side once you've bolted on one side. Reattach the lower radiator hose and reinstall your clamp. If you have one of these worm clamps that you're using or replacing the old one with, just be very careful how much you tighten these because they can actually break the radiator if you over tighten them. They could also strip out here and not hold pressure anymore. So once you get it snug, at most 1/8 to 1/4 turn, and that is plenty tight right there. Looking at the old fan assembly, we can see these two tabs that need to be popped off so we can remove the retainer for that lower radiator hose. What we need to do is actually squeeze them in just like this. I'm using a screwdriver to press on them. Once you squeeze them in enough, the retainer, the clip, will pop through. And all we need to do is install it on the new fan assembly. Also from the old fan assembly, remove this little grommet where the coolant overflow mounts and mount it onto the new fan assembly. Typically you would just press it on here. Sometimes they're a little stubborn. There we go. Now let's carefully slide the fan assembly down in place. Make sure you push away any wiring harnesses that are in your way. Once you get it past the tight spots, it should fall right down into place. Once everything's lined up, clip the fan assembly back onto the radiator. Resecure this lower hose on with the white clip. Then resecure the wiring harness and plug in the fan. Once you've plugged in one side, do the same to the other side. Off of the old fan assembly, we have to remove these J-nuts that secure the overflow tank in. Just pry them up and out with a pocket screwdriver. And to secure them, simply slide them over the new assembly. push them until they line up with the hole and they're locked in. Install the overflow tank. Make sure it lines up with that pin on the bottom. We'll resecure this harness and resecure it with the 2 bolts. Get the hose back into the overflow and the cap. Make sure you snap that on, and then the hose that comes off of it just sits right here, and this is basically just in case it overflows. Reinstall the upper radiator hose, slide it over the radiator, and on the other end as well. Put the clamps back on, line them up with where they were before. That gives them the best chance to seal up. All right. Now let's get this intake piece back in, line it up with the air box. Make sure you slide it in all the way. We'll put the bolt back on this side and the push clip back on this side. Now reinstall this cover and put back all the push clips that held it on. And that's installed. It's time to fill up our cooling system, and I recommend using one of these spill-proof funnels if you have access to one, because it makes it a whole lot easier to fill without spilling, of course, and it helps in the bleeding process. This is now the highest point in the system, and naturally air is going to want to rise up into this funnel as coolant gets pulled in. We're going to fill up this funnel and let it bubble out. We're going to keep filling it until no more air bubbles come out of the funnel. Once it has settled, turn the vehicle on and let the engine run. That's going to circulate the coolant through the system as the water pump pumps it through. Therefore, we'll push any excess air out of the system and pull in all the coolant. Turn the temperature of the heat all the way up inside the vehicle with the blower set to low so it doesn't cool the engine off too much, and just feel for it. You want to make sure it's blowing really hot air out of the vents so that you know the heater core is full of coolant. Once the engine is at operating temperature, the thermostat has opened up and the air bubbles are no longer showing up in the funnel, you know the coolant system is bled. At that point, we can remove the funnel. All right, let's pull our funnel off. Reinstall the radiator cap. Make sure you lock it in fully, and that is filled up.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.